Here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, I always like to have spirited discussions with folks with whom we disagree. Michael Hiltzik is a columnist at the LA Times and a Pulitzer Prize winner. Is always one of my favorite guys to spar with, and he joins us now once again here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Michael, sir, good morning. Welcome back.
Good morning to you.
To the testing, I think one of the problems is that in the beginning, you did have one test that the FDA had put out, or whether the CDC had put out, one test that was approved. It was woefully defective, and it took some time to get the regulations dealt with in order to allow for more tests to go about. So I think we got off to a more difficult start in terms of testing from the beginning, particularly because of a failure of government when it comes to that regulatory regime. As for coming up in the succeeding weeks, I think things have gotten remarkably better given the fact that here in this country, we have, 350 million people. It is a massive undertaking, and we have had millions of tests in the United States of America and millions more coming about. And so while I think that it is important to increase that, and I agree with you that we haven't done a good enough job in that regard, I don't think that the idea that government can somehow stimulate the increase in the testing adequately, or that we should be waiting months, potentially more, in order for tests to be ramped up to the way that they should be, is appropriate, is right, and I just don't have trust in government to handle that in the first place. So I'm not surprised by a failure in that regard.
I think you're dead wrong on that on a number of counts. First of all, we have the technology, and we always have, to roll out these tests. The CDC rolled out a bad test. The WHO had a good test. The CDC, or federal government, refused it. States and labs had good tests. Federal government refused to let them use it. Other countries, including Canada, had tests ready. South Korea had tests ready. Taiwan had tests ready. This was not rocket science. We knew even going into this pandemic that tests would be the number one task. The fact that we didn't do it, that's on the government. The reason it didn't do it isn't because it didn't know how, or the technology wasn't available. It did know how, and the technology was available. But it chose to sit on its butt instead of rolling it out.
In the beginning, the problem was the CDC had one test.
We have not improved. We're not where we need to be.
Well, we may not be where we should be, but we are absolutely better than where we were for sure. And when it comes to that early part of the test, though, there was only one test that the CDC allowed, Michael. So if the CDC initially offers one test and only allows one test, and it's a defective test, I wholeheartedly agree with you that that is a failure of government not meeting the challenge in the beginning. For sure, in terms of your point about ramping up and not being ready, it's because the CDC only allowed one test to go out there, and that was a defective test. But let's go to the reopening question here, because in my view, I think we're at a point where, yes, we do have a lot more understanding and knowledge about this virus, certain things that we should be doing as far as precautions. How are we not at a point where we can trust the majority of people? Yes, there are going to be some people who will not follow those regulations or suggestions and what have you. That's always going to happen in a free society. People will sometimes take undue risks that they shouldn't. But how come we cannot start trusting now the people of this country and do a wider scale reopening with social distancing measures in place instead of a piecemeal, let's just do this group and this type of business and this and that, and slow the ability for people to get back to life?
Well, all right. Let me take those points, and I'm not sure it's in the same order that you stated them. We can trust most people. We can trust most people, and we do trust most people. And when I go out on the street, I see almost everybody wearing a mask. But the fact that, whatever percent, 5% of people are not wearing masks and are arrogant about it, that's not simply a 5% risk. That's a major risk, because they can infect a lot more people. That's the whole point of public health, is that you want everybody to be healthy, not just for themselves, but for yourself. Because an unhealthy person, or a person who takes risks that he or she says, well, I'm just risking myself, that's wrong and it's stupid and it's moronic. They're not just risking themselves, they're risking everybody else. So we still need to have rules in place and social practices in place that protect everybody and protect them from the idiots out there who think that it's that they're making a political statement, or they're standing up to freedom. It's freedom to harm everybody else. And I'm fully in sympathy with businesses that say, if you're not wearing a mask, you're not getting in the door. If you're not wearing a mask, we're not letting you check out your merchandise, and we're throwing out of these premises because you are risking the other shoppers. You are risking the employees who we've spent a lot of money to protect.
Yeah.
And you're just being an idiot, and
I made that point
and
before.
I would use a word that I don't want to use on your show, but we know what these people are.
Let me agree with you right there for a moment, Michael Hiltzik, which is, I'm not a believer that government should require the masks, but I think that if any business tells a customer you're not allowed in here, whether by law or by their own choice, they have that right as a business, and they ought to have that right. And clearly it's a good precaution for business owners to say, we're making this sort of restriction. And I said that in my opening monologue at the top. I said, look, if you go into business, don't throw a fit at the business owner or just the worker who's telling you, I'm sorry, you can't come in here, because whether by law or by our own choice, we're not letting customers in without a mask. I mean, I think it's asinine to be just a jerk that way and mistreat people when they're just doing what they think they need to do or should do.
Let me make another point here, which I think is important when you talk about reopening, because this is a point I've written about a few times now. The government can't dictate reopening. I mean, it can, in certain contexts, and for businesses that don't care much about their employees. The only entities that can dictate reopening are patrons and customers. And if I'm into a business establishment and I see a lot of people not wearing masks, I leave. I'm not going to do business there because I'm taking my life in my hands. And that's, I think, what's happening. If you look at the figures on restaurant reservations and restaurant orders in the states that have gone whole hog for reopening, you are not seeing 100% of that business coming back. In fact, you're in every state, you're barely seeing 20% of that business coming back. And one of the reasons is that the average consumer isn't convinced that government or business has made it safe enough to go back to the old ways. So the fact is that rules like, you have to wear a mask, rules like you have to keep your distance, that's good for business, because without it, customers aren't going to walk in the door. I mean, sensible customers are going to walk in the door. And if a business just wants to serve the idiots who they're taking a stand by not wearing a mask, those businesses are going to go out of business because it's a small proportion of the customer base.
But that actually, I think that underscores the justification for reopening, because I think most businesses, even without a law in place, will say, we need you for the time being to come in with a mask, to keep social distancing. You'll still have stores doing that sort of thing. When you go to Walmart or Target, they're going to have the distance markers and so forth. And I think they're going to take those precautions. And over time, people will feel more comfortable getting out there. But if we have restrictions where you're saying, no, you can't go to these types of places, or you're going to be arrested if you go to a gym in New Jersey, because even though you're wearing a mask and so forth, let people and businesses make those decisions. And I think, going to your point, that they're going to be smart about it. But I want to play a clip here in cut 4.